She has given thousands of interviews across 6 decades. Gloria has said more, in print, in song, in the long record of a writing life that began before most of her fans were born, than almost any woman in the history of gospel music. And yet the one thing that every serious student of the Gaither homecoming era has quietly wondered about, the one question that has never received a direct public answer from her, remains, at the surface, unanswered. Which singer on that stage did Gloria Gaither not trust? She has never said the name in any traditional sense, not in a television interview, not in any of the dozens of books she has written, not from any stage, in any city, in any of the years since those homecoming videos made her face and her voice part of the faith lives of millions of American families. But here is what the gospel community has not understood until now. She has been answering that question for 30 years, in pieces, in carefully chosen words placed into books and essays and rare, unhurried interviews across 3 decades, in what she said, and more revealingly, in what she consistently, deliberately chose not to say. At 82 years old, the complete picture has finally assembled itself, and once you see it assembled, you cannot unsee it. Stay with us, because at the 10-minute mark of this video, we are going to lay out exactly what Gloria Gaither has said across 30 years, and show you why, when those pieces are placed in order, and read against the documented history of those homecoming years, there is only one name they point toward. Gloria Gaither has always understood something about words that most people learn too late in life. The words you choose in a specific moment are important, but the words you choose to use in every moment, across a decade, across 3 decades, in book after book and interview after interview, those words are your actual testimony. Not a statement, a pattern. And patterns, Gloria Gaither has always known, do not lie. Born Gloria Sickle on March 4, 1942, in Battle Creek, Michigan, she came to the Gaither partnership already in full possession of her own intellectual and spiritual identity. She was not completing someone else's vision. She was matching it, in depth of thought, in precision of language, in a theological seriousness that has never settled for the comfortable answer when the honest one was available and the person across from her was ready to hear it. Because he lives, in 1971, the King is coming. Something beautiful. More than 600 songs across more than 5 decades, each one a document of what Gloria actually believed at the time she wrote it, not what she hoped would land well with an audience, not what the moment commercially required. What she believed. She has written about this distinction herself, many times. In terms that make clear, she considers the difference between those 2 things, the difference between ministry and performance. For millions of people who grew up watching those homecoming videos, who wore out the VHS tapes and then the DVDs, who played certain performances so many times that particular arrangements became part of the permanent furniture of their faith, Gloria was the still point at the center of something always in motion. Bill ran the room. The cameras caught the great tenors and baritones doing what only they could do. Gloria watched. She listened. She remembered conversations from years prior, and returned to them in ways that caught people off guard, with the realization that she had been thinking about what they said, long after they had forgotten saying it. Those who have worked inside the Gaither world across its most significant years have described her consistently in one way. She reads people with a clarity that only decades of concentrated, patient attention to human beings tends to produce. She notices what people say. She notices with equal precision what they do not say. And she notices the gap between the 2, the space between the public self and the private one, with an acuity that has made her one of the most trustworthy judges of character in a world where character is the one thing that cannot finally be faked. She does not close her observations until she understands what they mean. That quality, across 60 years of ministry and relationship and public life, has rarely cost her anything. The years we are about to examine are the exception. The homecoming video series that Bill launched in 1991 became something none of them fully anticipated when they gathered in that Alexandria, Indiana living room on a January afternoon with a camera and a room full of people who had not sung together in years. What began as an attempt to preserve a generation before it was lost became, within 4 years, one of the most successful series in Christian entertainment history. By the mid-90s, the arenas were full. The videos were moving millions of copies out of Christian bookstores across the country. Being associated with the Gaither name meant something specific and serious. You were representing not just your career, not just your talent, but a platform that had become one of the most trusted presences in the faith lives of ordinary American families, who did not always have language for what they believed, but recognized the truth of it when they heard these songs sung by these voices. That kind of platform raises the stakes of everything. And Gloria Gaither understood those stakes with a specificity that her public warmth did not always signal to the people around her. She has written about this, not once but many times, across many years and many books, in a way that only makes full sense when you understand what she was witnessing as she wrote. The theme that returns with the most consistency across her body of work from those years is not joy, though joy is present. It is not grace, though grace runs through everything she has produced. The theme she returns to, with a frequency that those who have read her carefully will recognize immediately, is the distinction between gift and character. The difference between what a person can do on a stage and who they are when the performance is over. The insistence, stated carefully, never as accusation, always as principle, that those two things are not the same, and that a ministry platform that confuses them is building on ground that will not hold. She wrote about this before 1994. She has continued writing about it since. The consistency of the concern across that span of years is not the consistency of an abstract theological interest. It is the consistency of someone who has been living in close contact with a specific situation and working out, in the only language available to her, what she knows and what she is permitted to say. The singer at the center of this story is not a secret to anyone who followed the homecoming world in the early 90s. Michael English joined the Gaither Vocal Band in 1985 at 23 years old from Henderson, North Carolina. His voice was, by any honest measure, extraordinary, a pure tenor with a range that seemed to have no natural ceiling and an emotional directness that arrived without effort. Bill Gaither recognized it from the beginning. What Bill does when he recognizes something genuine is invest in it without reservation, and he placed Michael at the center of the platform, gave him the songs that required everything from a voice, and watched as the gospel music industry confirmed everything he believed. By 1994, Michael English had claimed more Dove Award wins in a single year than any artist in the history of the award. 6 Dove Awards taken home in one evening, a record that still stands today. What no award could measure, what no award has ever been designed to measure, was the alignment between that extraordinary gift and the private life of the soul required to sustain it over time. Gloria knew this gap existed. She has been saying so, in her own language, for 30 years. What nobody has done until now is lay out what she said, in what order, and why the pattern only points in one direction. Stay with us. And this is where the story arrives at what it has been about all along. In the spring of 1994, Michael English came forward publicly with an acknowledgement that changed the gospel world's understanding of everything it thought it knew about him. He had been in a relationship outside his marriage, an affair with gospel singer Maribeth Jordan, who was pregnant. He came forward voluntarily. He returned all 6 of his Dove Awards. He stepped away from the Gaither Vocal Band and from gospel music without a formal announcement or a press release. Everything the previous decade had built was, in a matter of weeks, publicly over. The gospel world knew the surface of this. What it did not know, and what has not been assembled before now, is the shape of what preceded it. And the clearest record of what preceded it is not a tell-all interview. It is Gloria Gaither's own writing, read in sequence against the documented history of those years. Here is what that reading reveals. Across the late 80s and into the early 90s, the years of Michael's rapid ascent within the Gaither organization, Gloria's writing returns with notable frequency to a specific concern. The concern is not stated as accusation. It is not named as a problem with a specific person. But it is concrete, and it is consistent. It is the concern of a woman watching something happen in close proximity that she cannot act on and cannot stop. She wrote about what happens when a platform grows faster than the interior formation of the person standing on it. When the audience's faith in a performer's spiritual reality runs ahead of the performer's own private accounting with God. When gift and performance become indistinguishable from the outside, when even the person inside the performance can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. She wrote about this not as a theoretical risk, but as an observed phenomenon, with the precision of someone writing from inside an experience rather than from a comfortable analytical distance. This is not a reading imposed on her work from outside. It is what her work from that period says, in the language she was given to say it, to anyone who reads it with the documented history of those years alongside it. After 1994, something observable shifted in how Gloria spoke publicly about Michael and about what had happened. Bill Gaither's account of that period is well documented. He has told it many times, in many settings, with the emotion of a man who has genuinely processed the experience through the lens of grace. The phone call, the conversation, the decision to keep the door open, the long years of patient waiting. The eventual restoration, Michael coming back to faith, back to music, back eventually to that homecoming stage in a moment that the people who were present have described as one of the most emotionally charged things they have ever witnessed in a room that has produced many such moments. Bill tells this story with visible freedom. It is one of the stories he returns to most readily when he talks about what grace actually means in practice. Gloria's public account of that same period is different in a way that, once you notice it, is very difficult to explain as anything other than intention. She does not tell the 1994 story, not in Bill's terms, not in her own. She has made reference to it in contexts where silence would have been more conspicuous than acknowledgement. She has affirmed, clearly and in her own voice, that she believes in restoration as fully as she believes in the songs she wrote that describe it. But the specific restoration of Michael English, the emotional journey, the personal reckoning, the story of what it cost and what it produced, that is territory she has consistently, across 30 years of writing and speaking, moved around rather than through. That is not an accident. People who choose their words as carefully as Gloria Gaither chooses hers do not omit the same story, the same specific, significant, documented story, 30 consecutive years by oversight. She is not omitting it because she forgot. She is not omitting it because the story is too small for her attention. She is omitting it, in the way she has omitted it, because the account she would be required to give is not the account that has been given in public, and she is not willing to give an account she cannot stand behind completely. What she has said, in the indirect but precise language she uses when this territory comes close, tells its own story. She has written about holding a discernment you cannot act on, carrying knowledge of a gap you can see clearly, but cannot ethically name without the kind of evidence that would give you standing to name it. She has written about the specific loneliness of that position inside a ministry context, about the cost of watching something move toward an outcome you cannot prevent, in a situation where your role does not include the authority to intervene. She has written in more recent years about what it means to finally reach an age where the unfinished accounts of a life deserve to be settled. Not for the last word, not for the satisfaction of having been right, but because the honest history of what these years were, and what the gospel demands of people who build things in its name, belongs somewhere in the record before the generation who lived it is gone. What Gloria Gaither has never done, across any of this, is say Michael English's name in the same sentence as the word trust. What she has done is construct, across 30 years of writing, a portrait of someone in those rooms who carried precisely the gap she describes. When you place her writing about platform and formation, and the gap between gift and private soul, alongside the documented history of Michael's years with the Gaither Vocal Band, the timing, the ascent, the outcome, the portrait resolves into one name. She knew, she carried it. She chose the only language available to her, and she has been using it, consistently, for 30 years. The gospel community that followed those years has always half-sensed this. What it has lacked is someone willing to lay the full record alongside the full history and say, look at what this adds up to. This is what it adds up to. For those of us who have followed Gloria's work across these 60 years, who have sung her songs in the moments when we needed something true to hold on to, who have read her books in the hours when the easy answers were not going to be enough, this part of the story has a particular weight. She is the most careful writer in the history of gospel music. That is not a compliment offered casually. It is a statement about what her body of work demonstrates, across 6 decades, about the relationship between experience and language. She does not reach for a phrase before she knows exactly what she means by it. She does not leave a sentence in print that she is not prepared to defend entirely, which means the omissions are as intentional as the statements, which means the story she has not told directly, across 30 years, has been in the record all along, in what she wrote around it, in what she chose not to say. In the gap between how Bill has spoken about Michael English's restoration, freely, fully, with visible emotion, and how she has not. If you have been a fan of the Gaither Vocal Band since those early homecoming years, you know what it felt like to hear Michael English sing, the specific quality of that voice, the way an entire arena could go still when he was building toward a song's center. You also know, if you have followed his long road back to faith and music, and eventually to that stage where it began, that his is one of the genuinely moving restoration stories in the history of this music. Gloria's silence about that restoration is not unkindness. Those who know her work know she is not capable of sustained unkindness. It is not in her character or her theology. It is something more specific and more honest. It is the silence of a woman who made a careful assessment of someone, found that assessment eventually confirmed by events she could not stop, and has chosen to honor the restoration publicly while holding privately what those years cost her to carry. If you have ever had to hold something you knew was true, without the standing to say it, without the evidence to act on it, watching the distance between what you sensed and what was visible to everyone else continue to widen, you know what Gloria Gaither carried through the late 80s and early 90s. And you understand why naming it, even now, takes the form it does. Not a declaration, an assembly. The pieces she has placed into the public record over 30 years, finally read in the right order. There is one more part of this that most people have not connected yet. The question of what Gloria knew and when she knew it is not simply a piece of the Michael English story. It is a window into the way the homecoming era was actually held together, and what it required of the 2 people most responsible for holding it. Bill Gaither's instinct has always been toward invitation. The open door, the long table, the belief, held without apology across his entire ministry, that the most truthful expression of the gospel is making room for everyone who wants to be in the room. That instinct built the homecoming era. The warmth you felt watching those videos was not manufactured. It was the product of a man who genuinely believes what he sings, and who extends to people in real life the same grace that the songs describe. That same instinct, on occasion, placed people on that platform whose private lives were in greater tension with what they were projecting than anyone watching could see. Gloria's counterbalance to that instinct is the part of the homecoming story that the cameras almost never caught. Those who understand what those years actually required describe her role, in the conversations that happened after the filming stopped and the arenas emptied, as something close to the conscience of the operation. Not as antagonist, not as skeptic, as the person asking the question that genuine love sometimes needs to ask before it opens the door all the way. Is this person in a place where the platform will help them grow, or in a place where the platform will widen a gap that is already dangerous, jummers? That question was not always answered correctly. The Michael English years made that plain. But here is the thing that the broader gospel community has not fully reckoned with, even now. Those 2 instincts, Bill's instinct toward grace and Gloria's instinct toward discernment, together produced something that neither one alone could have made. The warmth was real, because Bill was genuine. The platform held as long as it did, because Gloria was watching. The restoration stories that came out of those years, including Michael's own, were possible because Bill held the door open. The integrity that made people trust the platform with their actual faith lives was possible because Gloria never stopped asking the harder question in the background. That balance, 2 people with genuinely different instincts, working in the same room, sometimes in real tension with each other, is the structural reason the homecoming era produced what it produced. And the honest account of what that balance cost, in specific situations with specific people across those years, is the story that has not been fully told. Gloria is the one person who holds the complete version of that story, and at 82, she is not finished with it. What comes next for Gloria Gaither, after 8 decades of living, 600 songs written, and a careful 30-year silence about what she observed in those rooms, is something those who love her work will be watching with the attention she has always deserved. She is not finished. She has said this with the quiet certainty of someone who has more to say and knows exactly what form she intends to say it in. The full account of what the homecoming years were, the texture of what it meant to build something that significant among people who were that human, is a history she believes belongs in the record before the generation who witnessed it from inside is gone. One question she leaves deliberately open, not about Michael English. That account, in her terms, has been assembled from everything she has placed into the record across 30 years. The question she leaves open is about the others, the artists whose gaps never became public, the situations that closed quietly, before a platform could make them permanent. The full measure of what those years required of the people who held responsibility for the ministry that contained all of it. She knows, she has always known, and the people who have followed her work closely enough to read its patterns, not just its statements, have always sensed it. Whatever Gloria Gaither says next, in a book, in a conversation, in the patient accumulation of words she has never once chosen carelessly, those who have followed her across the full length of this ministry know one thing about her that has been true from the beginning. She says, the true thing. It may take her 30 years to find the form she can stand behind, but she says it, and when she does, it carries everything that 30 years of careful holding has placed inside it. Her story is not finished, and neither is the story she spent 60 years helping to make. If what Gloria shared in this video has stayed with you, the next video we have put together will as well. We have been examining the quieter chapters of the homecoming era, the conversations that preceded some of its most significant moments, and the ones that followed them in the years after the cameras were gone. What came out of that process is something the people who loved those videos have been waiting a long time to hear placed on the record.